Alright, our objective for today, we are in lesson 7. I will be able to simplify expressions including symbols of inclusion using the order of operations. So we learned in lesson 4 the order of operations. To start off, first thing you need to know are symbols of inclusion, such as fraction bars, absolute value symbols, parentheses, braces, and bracket, indicate when numbers and variables are part of the same term. So something like this. Okay? All of this whole thing, is the same term. We talked about in lesson 2 how a term is something that's separated by either a plus sign or a minus sign. So basically the fact that this whole thing is in parentheses shows you that that whole thing is one term. So to simplify an expression with multiple symbols of inclusion, you start with the innermost symbol of inclusion and then work your way outward. So when we talked in lesson 4 about the order of operations, G-E-M-A, grouping symbols, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, when we remember all of these go from the left to the right. This G, the reason that this is not a P like we talked about, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, the reason we don't do that is because this G represents not just parentheses, but grouping symbols and symbols of inclusion, things like this absolute value bracket, or things like these brackets right here. All of that is included within that G, okay? So we want to start using our order of operations, grouping symbols from left to right. Here's our first grouping symbol, so we know that's where we got to start. I bring this 9 down. 4 minus 6. In lesson 6, we talked about changing subtraction to addition, changing the sign of the second term. Here I go, same signs, add and keep, different signs, subtract. These signs are different, so I subtract. That gives me a 2. Take the sign of the higher number, that's a because 6 is higher than 4, that's negative 2. I bring everything else down. So I've got 9 minus the absolute value of negative 2. Now I take the absolute value of negative 2, which is 2. And then I've just got to bring down that 9. 9 minus 2 should give me a 7. Okay? So I work inside my symbols of inclusion first. Same thing here. I want to start with my innermost symbol of inclusion. That's 6 minus 8. I'm going to bring everything else down. 6 minus 8. Again, I want to change subtraction to addition. Change the sign of the second term. I go same signs, add and keep, different signs, subtract. Those signs are the same. That's a negative 8. Minus 6 gives me a 2. I bring down the negative. And then everything else I've got to bring down. So 5 times 2 plus 3 plus negative 2. I've still got this inside of a bracket, so I've still got to evaluate that. I still use my same signs, add and keep, different signs, subtract. 3 plus negative 2, those signs are different, so I subtract, that gives me a 1. I bring down everything else. 5 times 2 plus 1. Okay? Now, here I've basically done everything inside of these two symbols of inclusion. So now this is just a 1. So now I've got addition and multiplication. Remember, I'm going left to right. I've done all my grouping symbols. I don't have any exponents. Now I'm at multiplication and division. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply this because multiplication becomes before addition. So 5 times 2 is 10 plus 1, which gives me 11. Okay? Same thing here. This says to simplify and to justify each step. We're not going to worry about the justifying right now. Let's just go ahead and simplify this, okay? One thing I go ahead and recognize is that if I've got a fraction bar right here, what I know is that this is basically inside of parentheses, like that right there, okay? Now, I want to work inside of my symbols of inclusion. This is the innermost parentheses, so I'm going to start with that. I'm going to bring everything else down. 5 times 4 plus 2 gives me 8 squared. Bring everything else down. I can go ahead and, since this is a totally separate term, I'm going to go ahead and evaluate this 4 times 5. What? Lord mercy. 4 times 5, which is 20, over 2. What I just realized is that 4 plus 2 is not 8, but 6. I multiplied them. 4 plus 2 gives me 6, not 8. Now, let's go ahead and keep evaluating this. I've got, inside these symbols of inclusion, I've got an exponent and a multiplication. I've got to figure out what comes first, multiplication or exponents. Well, here, exponents becomes before multiplication. So let's go ahead and evaluate that. Let's bring down the 5 times 6 squared is 36 plus, I'm going to go ahead and evaluate that since it's a totally separate term. 20 over 2 is 10. Alright, now all I've got to do is multiply this 5. What's wrong about that? Yeah, something about that's not right. Let me have to do this one again. Or you may have done it wrong. Let's look. 36 times 5, 0, 3, 150, that's a 180. So 180, what? That's right. Plus 10. Did you look in the lesson? 180 plus 10 is 190. Alright, so we had some confusion as to whether or not that is right, but that is right. Alright, that 6 squared gave me 36. Then this is still inside of my brackets or my grouping symbols, so I multiplied 5 times 36, which gave me 180. Bring down the plus 10. That gives me 190. Last problem we're going to do is this one. This says 2. Compare the expressions, use greater than, less than, or equal to. So to compare them, I've got to figure out an answer for this, figure out an answer for this, and then compare the two. So I got to start inside my innermost parentheses. So I'm going to bring down this 12, bring down everything else. 7 minus 5 is 2 cubed minus 14. I'm just going to get an answer for this one, and then I'll worry about getting an answer for this one. All right, I'm still working inside parentheses. Let's bring down the 12. All right, 5 times 2 cubed. Well, I look and say what comes first. Exponents or multiplication. Remember, G-E-M-A. Exponents comes first, so that's 5 times 8 minus 14. Again, I've got multiplication here and then subtraction here. So let's go ahead and do the multiplication. Bring down 12 plus. That 12 stays on the outside until I've completely done everything inside of this bracket right here. Okay? So 5 times 8 gives me 40. 40 minus 14 is still in that bracket. Alright, so I've got to subtract the 40 minus 14. 40 miness 14 gives me, I'm going to go up here. That's a 3, so that's a 6, 2, 26. So that's 12 plus 26, which should give me 38. So 38 is the answer to the first one. Now I need an answer for this second one. I'm going to write the whole thing over here. Okay? 9 minus 5 squared plus 7. That's a bracket. Minus 3 cubed. Again, I've got to figure out the whole thing inside of here. Then I'm going to subtract this 3 cubed. Okay, so working my innermost parentheses. 9 minus 5 gives me 4 squared plus 7. Close my bracket. Minus 3 cubed. Okay, 4 squared. I've got an exponent. I've got addition. So I've got to do that exponent first. 4 squared is 16 plus 7. I've still got this inside a bracket. Minus 3. 16 plus 7 gives me 23 minus 3 cubed. Sorry, 23 minus 3 cubed. Okay? Now, I've got subtraction and I've got exponent. Which one of those comes first? Okay, well, grouping symbols, exponent. So let's go ahead and do my exponents. 23 minus 3 cubed is 27. Here I've got subtraction that we learned we want to change to addition, change the sign of the second term. Same signs add and keep, different signs subtract. Those signs are different, so let's subtract. That gives me 27 minus 23 gives me 4. Take the sign of the higher number, that's a negative. So basically, what I've got for the first one is 38. What I've got for the second one is negative 4. So 38 is greater than negative 4. My answer is a greater than sign. Greater than, greater than. All that work for one greater than. This was a positive 38. This was a negative 4. Work inside your symbols of inclusion first. Start with the innermost parentheses, then work your way out. That's all.